3.
We are recording.
Are you good? You were going? Okay, congratulations. All right, we are group 3 and we're doing the achievement task value theory. So I'm the white hat, so I'm going to start off talking about information about this theory. The main idea of the achievement task value theory is that it's defined in terms of 4 components. So attainment value, intrinsic interest, extrinsic utility value, and cost belief. So I'm going to go through what all of those mean and a few examples of each. So the first one is attainment value, which is also the importance. And the definition of this is the importance of doing well on a task. So an example of this would be an individual high in need for belongingness will probably have a higher attainment value for tasks that stress belongingness as opposed to achievement. The next one is extrinsic interest, which is the enjoyment people experience when doing a task. And this is generally more related to the pleasure of doing a task than the outcomes of the task. And when intrinsic motivation is high, individuals will be more engaged and persist longer in the task. The third component is utility value, which is the usefulness of the task for individuals in terms of their future goals, including their career goals. This is more related to the ends of the task than the means of doing a task, so long-term goals. The last one is cost belief, which is the perceived negative aspects of engaging in the task. In this, you cannot usually engage in more than one task at the same time, and different costs include like the perceived amount of effort in doing a task and the anticipated emotional states. For example, performance anxiety or fear of failure. And those are the 4. So personal application for me is that it's important for me to realize what daily activities I have high and low attainment values in and why. And realizing this is important for me to focus in because it's the first step in the process of change. Then I'll be able to reevaluate my motives and train myself to think more positively. For my future vocation, I will be working with children in some way, and it's important that I understand where their interests are placed and why they are placed there. Taking the time to dig deeper and discover the children's motives is crucial in order to assist and challenge them in their learning processes.
Okay, so we are going to share with you guys a little bit of the green hat perspective. So what improvements we think could have been made to the research that we looked at. So we're going to do this looking at 5 different values. So practicality, view of human nature, relevance, focus, and consistency with scripture. And Nate and I kind of tag teamed on this, so we'll be going back and forth. So for practicality, we thought that it was pretty difficult to segregate one's values into the 4 separate components of attainment, intrinsic, utility, and cost. So in order to determine one's values, a researcher would have to be completely subjective to the person being studied. So they could be improved, like the whole study could be improved if they were less subjective with the values that were being tested.
Yeah, and also this study, the author mainly discusses the process of academics. There's no really real world situations. And I said that it'd be kind of hard for someone to make this application because not everyone is in school. And I said, so many people cannot make the connection between 1st and 6th grade difficulty levels books, because I know there's one part in the article where a teacher had, I think she had a 3rd or 4th grade class where she had 1st through 6th grade reading difficulty. So I think it'd be kind of hard to have someone who has a career to kind of make this connection between academics and job setting. So I feel like the author could have made more of an improvement on real life situations such as making a payment to a house or making a career decision. So
yeah. So for view of human nature, we thought that the study really didn't have an accurate representation of what humans really are because it split up our values into 4 separate things and only 4. So we thought if researchers were to add kind of extrinsic motivators, environment, and one's understanding of the decision as a whole, that would kind of give a more realistic view of what the decision-making process is like.
yeah, and so I'd say the value of learning is very important. Yeah, this article I feel reaches a small audience. I kind of talked about how about motivation with someone who just lost a family member or they've just lost a job. I think the author could improve on talking and explaining like how important intrinsic motivation is for real life situations rather than classroom settings. So.
Yeah. And then for relevance, we thought depending upon who is being researched, the 4 components really could be altered to fit the diversity of those people more specifically. So for example, if researchers were looking at grade school students, they could include values of like their parents or what their parents' values were, because those are huge factors and parents have a huge influence on their child. But if they were looking at adults, they could be looking at kind of or control for the amount of stress that's present in that adult's life. So for example, if somebody was really stressed out, they would probably value perfection more, but if they were really laid back, they just might value enjoyment. So, and that's completely dependent upon like the stress and the time of the situation, and can vary depending on that.
Yeah, and along with that, I really feel that this article reaches a academic standpoint very heavily, and I feel like for the author to improve on some of the things he said, he would be able to add more real scenarios to an academic setting, such as getting a bad grade on a test, or a limited resource to a student, or a student that's been presented with a failure. Because I said I believe that true motivation comes when there's a failure present, to kind of work back and be intrinsically motivated to succeed and excel in that aspect of their life. So.
Yeah, and then for focus, we thought that in this study, the 4 value components are used to look at a lot of different tasks, so not just students in a classroom. But we think that if they were to kind of control the study more and just look at one specific task or decision, and kind of center the values for that task or decision, there'd be less likelihood for confounding variables, because if you look at like 4 separate activities, there are a lot of different factors that could play into the decision-making task. So if the researchers decided, okay, we're gonna make these tasks for this specific, these motivations for this specific task, then that would kind of be a more accurate and controlled way of looking at it.
Yeah, and along with that, I said it may have been more beneficial for the author to provide more examples and advice with each component. So this may have provided more realistic scenarios for readers to follow and carry out and apply to their own life. So.
And then lastly is consistency with scriptures. And I really didn't think that this article was really consistent with scriptures, because it really talked about humans as being extrinsically and situationally motivated by what's going on around them. But in scripture, it talks a lot about us being motivated by Christ and his example for our lives. So, the research really doesn't have any kind of value or influencing factor that shows the influence that Christ could have on our life. So I think for it to be more consistent with scripture, it could definitely include values and the influence that Christ can have on our life.
Yeah, and this study, I feel, depicts that students should be motivated to learn and through an academic setting, rather than learning and being motivated through like what the Bible has to say about like what we're supposed to be motivated to. And I said, so these 4 components, based on the author's advice, are based on succeeding through works. This may have not been what he meant, but kind of reading the article, I feel that this is kind of the message he's giving off. And so, yet the Bible discusses that we're to be motivated through our faith, not through works. And so I feel like the author could improve this study by adding examples to exemplify Christ's love for us, and how we can motivate ourselves to strengthen our relationship with him. So.
And then for our personal and future vocation application, for a specific issue in my life, I would say that looking at my academic motivation or kind of to do my coursework, I usually only look at like my utility value in that situation. But if I were to open that up to see how one specific assignment could influence a lot of my other values, I think that would be a stronger encouragement or like influencer for me to be motivated to do different tasks.
Yeah, and I kind of talked about, with the application for me, I talked about how strong the intrinsic motivation is in my life. And I really feel that my intrinsic motivation has allowed me to motivate myself and challenge myself to points that I've never been before. Yet there's other areas of my life that I view as tasks, and I don't really find the deeper meaning in those tasks. So applying some of these, like the importance or the intrinsic values in this article to my life to have, so I can apply them to those task areas and find deeper meaning to what they are in my life. So, yeah.
And then for my future vocation, I want to do something with kids. So I think it's really important to understand the values that a certain kid would have and kind of play either the lesson I'm trying to teach them or the activity that I'm trying to do to that child's values. And especially if there's a huge room full of students, that means that there are a ton of different values in the room. So if I'm trying to do a lesson, I want to try and play to as many values as I can.
Yeah, so in my future, I want to be striving to be a physical therapist or personal trainer. And as I said, so these 4 components are very important in my field that I'm going into, especially the value and importance component, because in a rehab setting for physical therapy, it's important for my subject or my patients to realize how important it is to value stretching or value exercise, especially as a personal trainer. And I can also use these to explain and help them build their self-efficacy and belief in themselves to further and exceed their goals.
All right, well, we've been sitting for a while. I think maybe we should do like a power pose or stand up. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
That's a good
that's
idea.
great.
All right.
The red hat, which is the practical applications of this theory. And so the practicality of this, the practical aspect of this theory is key because this theory explains how one can approach decision making. And I specifically like the second component of this theory, which is the intrinsic interest. And looking at this intrinsic interest is generally a practical self-assessment that allows one to examine his or her performance at the task and whether they enjoy the task or not. So for example, like a mathematics student will enjoy courses where he or she is taking mathematics. So all of those core courses, they're gonna enjoy that and they're gonna be more motivated to work hard and do well towards this task. But the student would not fit as well if they were taking an art history class, because they wouldn't be engaged in the content because they don't see it as relevant and they're not as engaged in the content. And so this component of the theory helps me recognize the task I enjoy. And because of this, it helps me in the future so I can decide, I can choose classes and I can choose a future career based on things that I know I enjoy. And so the view of human nature. I felt like this theory brought a very self-centered approach to human nature. The theory emphasizes improving oneself. And regarding this attainment value, it's important for the individual to do well at a task and enjoy what they're doing. And I believe these 2 ideas are very important, but I think it's a kind of a selfish way of thinking. I want to be motivated in my future career by my ability to help others and not necessarily just what I enjoy doing. And while it's necessary for me to enjoy my work, I want to find enjoyment through helping others. And I feel like they become more intrinsically motivated as I'm able to help them with this and share my ideas with them. And the relevance, I find a lot of relevance in this theory regarding the third component, which is the utility value. And this component references how the task one is participating in can affect the future. And this is relevant for me because like the majority of college students, we're participating in classes that generally we don't always see the value for in the future. And this component of the theory helps me see that everything I'm doing right now will impact the future and will have future implications. And in the future, I want to be able to apply the various knowledge I have gained through the courses I've taken, whether that be gen ed courses or major courses. And so I want to approach these classes with not as the useless courses, but more as what can I take from this class that will help me in the future. And if that's something very small or something that doesn't even apply specifically to my career, it can apply to me growing as an individual. And focus. This theory motivates me to focus on knowledge I have gained and strive to gain throughout my college experience. I think knowledge is the key to helping others in our future careers. And so if we focus on our attention on gaining knowledge now, we can kind of think the knowledge I'm gaining now is to help somebody in the future. And I think that kind of changes our outlook of just gaining knowledge just to perform well on the test, or instead we can look at it, gaining knowledge to help somebody improve their lives someday. And consistency with the scriptures, I felt like this theory correlates with scriptures because we can easily fall into the mundane circumstances of life. Like in the middle of a semester, we kind of just get one task done at a time, and we don't really see the relevance in it. But during these times, I think it's important to remember Ephesians 5:16, which says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity." And I feel like this is an important passage to remember because during the tasks that we don't find enjoyment in, we can quickly lose focus. And as believers, we're called to live wisely while making the most of every opportunity we're given. So in other words, God has a purpose in every encounter that we face. And whether we're sitting in a boring lecture or we're just studying for an exam, we're called to gain wisdom in these circumstances and find joy that He gives us. And so the personal application, this theory applies to my life in the way I choose to interact daily with events. I want to begin assessing my perceived enjoyment, and instead of just doing tasks that I find enjoyment in, I can do those quote unquote boring tasks, but find enjoyment by kind of changing my mindset. My future vocation, I want to go into clinical exercise physiology, and so I'd be working with people kind of in a hospital, but working with people who have chronic diseases. And this theory impacts me because I want to be motivated by the means and not the ends. And I feel like this is very important because as I'm working with somebody, the process of getting to where we want to be is more important than where we want to be. And we won't get there unless we focus on the means to get there. And so my client, whoever I'm working with, may think that the here and now is kind of useless, if they just want to get to a certain point. And it's kind of the same in personal training, but I think it's important to kind of refocus and show that what we're doing right now will affect the future, and we need to focus on that right now.
I have the yellow hat, which is the positive aspects of the theory. So for practicality, this theory challenges people to find areas that give them intrinsic interest in order to enjoy the tasks that they are doing. So the intrinsic interest also allows people to focus more on the activity itself and the process of the activity versus the outcome of the activity. And it allows people to make well thought out and rational decisions. For the view of human nature, this theory promotes the idea that people generally work harder in areas that they have a more personal interest in. So their passions and interests are what promote success in different areas of life. So it's important for people to seek those out, and getting involved in areas that they have interest in will help encourage them to work harder and gain achievement in that area. For relevance, this is kind of similar, that everyone has areas that they view as having a higher importance than other areas in their life. And so recognizing those different areas will allow them to have more success because they'll be doing something that they're passionate about. And additionally, a person's self-perception and expectancy predicts their level of achievement in that task. So forming a positive self-image is really important, and this can be applied by parents and teachers being encouraging towards students and helping them form that positive self-image. For focus, putting a focus on individual preferences will allow engagement within one areas of interest, creating an environment for success. Cost belief also helps people put a greater focus on activities that are more important to them, and allows them to better manage their time and to put more energy into areas that have a higher importance and help students direct their interest towards what they're learning and increase their success. For consistency with scriptures, this theory allows us to recognize that God has given us each a unique set of passions and gifts, and so recognizing these passions and engaging them will help us put more effort into those areas and be successful and excel in those areas and use that for His kingdom. A personal application, the article talked about how some people have a higher need for affiliation and belongingness than they do for academic success. And so I would identify myself as that type of person that would put affiliation is higher than academic success. And so that will allow me to seek out spending time with people as a way to add value and enjoyment to my life, but then still be able to have a high attainment value in having academic success is a little important too. For the future career application in a counseling setting, I could use this theory for a client that is struggling with doing well in school by finding areas that interest them and learning how to incorporate those interests into the topics that they're learning in school so that those topics become more interesting to them, and then also by being a source of encouragement to boost their sense of expectancy and sense of competence to result in higher success.
Okay, so I did the black hat aspect, which was the negative aspect of it all. And so with practicality, with the first component of the theory being the attainment value, there's certain, it just shows that there's certain aspects that people hold really dear to themselves as part of their identity. Like, for example, if a musician has a recital and does very well, it's really important to them to do well just because their self-identity lies within being a musician. But from a pessimistic viewpoint, there is a possibility that there are people that are still out there who haven't found their niche yet or found their passion. And they haven't found like something that they can self-identify with and feel like it's part of their own identity. And the second part of the theory, the intrinsic value, it goes hand in hand with the attainment value component, just because there can be no intrinsic value for what you're passionate about if you have nothing that you're passionate about to begin with. And for the third part of the theory, the utility value concerns itself with the career goals and sometimes the extrinsic values which play into those. And if there's something that interests you, yet there's a certain area that does not interest you that's mandatory for the interest itself, then the thing that is not that interesting to you holds utility value. And this is something that can be viewed as negative already, since the person needs to put up with something in order to get what they're really passionate about. And the fourth and final piece is the cost belief, which the article itself says is negative, so they kind of already did their job for me. Just says that because the person is deeply involved with one passion and they're not able to spread themselves out over things that they might have a little bit of interest in. And with the view of human nature, this theory is definitely sound in terms of academics, but there are a few things that come into play which do have negative effects to it. It doesn't, there are circumstances that can affect the way this theory is perceived, like it doesn't take into account whether or not one may be going through a rough patch in life, similar to what you said. And it is effective from academia, no doubt, but someone whose relative recently passed away is definitely going to have a harder time applying this theory as opposed to someone who has nothing going wrong in their life at the moment. The theory does discuss briefly the effects that dating or social events can have, but never the effects of a tragedy or other harsh real-life events. In terms of relevance, the main point from this theory is that the achievement task values and how we can use intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in order to reap the benefits of these values. But the areas of motivation themselves can have a few issues. I don't think that the article took apathy into account. And this is something that I've seen set up into a lot of people in my life. Apathy destroys motivation of both kinds, and this places a lot of weight on the capability of attaining the achievement task values that we want. With the focus, the theory places much of its focus on the importance of achievement in regards to academics, but there seem to be many different avenues that they could have taken as well. Not to say that the basic ideas couldn't be applied to other aspects of life, but it's just to say that it could have thrown in a few more areas, I think. I would have personally used the area of spiritual life and how one can find their achievement values from there. And consistency with the scriptures, I was supposed to find stuff that was inconsistent with it, and I was unable to do so. Everything seemed to match up pretty well. With my personal application, when I stated earlier that it would be harder for those who have seen the harder parts in life to act on this theory, I kind of had myself in mind with this. There have been a lot of points in my life where like finding my identity was a really difficult thing, and I questioned myself as well as God throughout the process of like my dad leaving my home and so on, and it was really easy for apathy to set into my life at that time, and for me to think that nothing good could possibly come out of it. And in a way, that's why I decided to take the negative aspect of this, just to kind of flush it out a little bit more. But I have, within like the past few years, started seeing the good things as to why this is happening to me. I do believe that everything happens for a reason, and I will never let the negative aspect of everything seem to match up pretty well. With my personal application, When I stated earlier that it would be harder for those who have seen the harder parts in life to act on this theory, I kind of had myself in mind with this. There have been a lot of points in my life where like finding my identity was a really difficult thing, and I questioned myself as well as God throughout the process of like my dad leaving my home and so on, and it was really easy for apathy to set into my life at that time, and for me to think that nothing good could possibly come out of it. And in a way, that's why I decided to take the negative aspect of this, just to kind of flush it out a little bit more. But I have within like the past few years started seeing the good things as to why this is happening to me. I do believe that everything happens for a reason, and I will never let the negative aspects of my life overtake me. In terms of future career application, it holds an extreme amount of weight for me. I want to be a child counselor and talk with kids whose parents are either going through divorce or are divorced. And this theory is absolutely critical for them to learn, just because they need to know what their passions are so that they can have an outlet to plug into, so that they don't go down like a